workshop of Wayne Henderson. Hi, Wayne.
Howdy. How you doing?
Thanks for having us.
Well, we certainly
It's a
welcome.
pleasure
Glad
to
to
meet
have
you.
you.
We're here to see Wayne to talk about his musical career and his guitar building. We want to have him tell his story in his own words. And let's start with your music.
Okay.
You're a very, very, very well-known guitarist.
Well, not maybe around rugby here.
Yeah, I know. And you're also a very, very quiet and unassuming person. I know that too. But there's a lot of people out there who admire and listen to your work. And what I'd like you to do a little bit is just take us through a little story of where you started, where you've been, and where you're going.
Okay.
And then show us a little bit of your rather unique style, and then we'll talk about your instruments. How's that?
Okay. Well, as far as, where I've been, I've always lived right in this same community right where you are right now. My mother's old home place is just around the corner and down the road about a mile. The old house that I was raised in, and my mother's 88 years old, still lives there in that house. And I've always lived in this community, right in this county anyway. And I started playing music when I was 5 years old because there was an old guitar laying around the house, and I was always influenced by music. My father was an old-time fiddle player, and there was music in the house just about as far back as my memory goes. And my dad played in, a band or two around with, they had a band called the Rugby Gully Jumpers. And,
Gully Jumpers?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think there used to be a band on the Grand Ole Opry called the Gully Jumpers. And I think they sort of borrowed that name, I think, for something. But anyway, they called it, like the rugby, this from this community here, called it the Rugby Gully Jumpers, with E.C. Ball as the guitar player. He was a fairly well-known, guitar player. And so he was a pretty good player and pretty famous guy eventually. But anyway, I was just into music because I always heard it around the house, and they would pick and have jam sessions at the house. And that old guitar was laying around when I was about 5 years old. I started picking and messing with it, and got so I could play a few chords. And when I got so I could play a few chords on it, I got so I could play G, C, and D. And after I got so I could do that, my dad was always pretty excited about getting me to back him up, and play some guitar with him. So I did that for years, and did that for a long time. I got so I could play better, and when I'd get to picking a tune out, like Arkansas Traveler, some of those old fiddle tunes he played. Back in those days, the old fiddlers believed guitar players were just supposed to play rhythm, play backup, and that's the way it's supposed to be. And every once in a while, I'd get to picking too many licks. He would shake that fiddle bow at me like he was gonna swat me with it. But if I just only known, he would never hit me with that fiddle bow because his fiddle bows were too hard to get.
Yeah.
And that's probably the only one he ever had.
Just didn't want the boy to get too flashy, right?
Yeah, didn't want me to get too flashy, and I'd have to go out in the woodshed, when he wasn't around, to practice picking out a tune. And so that went on for a long time, and then I guess I used to listen to the radio a lot. I listened to the Grand Ole Opry, and I listened to WCKY in Cincinnati. They had a radio show that came on every night, and they played a theme song called Steel Guitar Rag. And I really loved that tune, and I heard it every night, and I finally got so I could pick out that tune. And that's one of the first tunes I remember getting so I could play the whole thing. And from that on, I went on, got to playing little gigs, and I got a Doc Watson record in the 60s sometime, I guess whenever he started making records. and I was fascinated by that, and have been influenced by his playing ever since. And Doc still's my favorite guitar player, and I still see him occasionally, and you know, he lives pretty close by here, and so that was a big influence in my picking style. And then about 1966, too, one of the first gigs I remember having is a little radio show. My brother and me and my brother and a couple of other guys used to play every Saturday morning on that little radio station in WKSK in West Jefferson, North Carolina, which is fairly close by here, 25 minutes away or something. And that was sort of the first picking engagement, like a regular thing that I remember ever having. We did that every Saturday morning for about 8 years. And we finally got Albert Hash to come play fiddle with us on that. And that's how I met Albert, or got acquainted with him better. You know, he was a great fiddle maker and an engineer and tool and die maker with, you know, factories around the community. And he was a total genius as far as building machinery and instruments too, you know. So he was a big influence on me too. His fiddling style and his ability to craft instruments as a craftsman. And then, you know, from that on, I've just, the best I remember have been playing music things, you know, ever since. I've never had a time when I didn't play, and almost still for today, there's almost never a day goes by that I don't pick it up to play the guitar a little bit. I at least have to tune it and check it out, you know, to see how it works and hit a few chords on it. So I play almost every day, and have for almost 40 years. Yeah.
When did you make your first recording, your first album?
I think the first recording I can remember ever doing, I got to play on a couple of tunes with Mr. Bob. You know, that was just a small, you know, record label. I'm sure I don't even remember what the label was or anything, but he put out lots. He eventually recorded for the Rounder Company and did pretty well with it. But that was one of the first times I ever got to record anything. I just got to play rhythm guitar for him to play, and that was probably sometime around, that was probably in the mid-60s sometime, best I remember. But the first recording I was on that sort of had my name on it and stuff was one I did with another guitar player named Ray Klein. And I did that for Mr. Patterson, the fellow you met last night, his recording label and everything. And that there's still a few copies of that around, you know, it's on a cassette tape, because it was on LPs when we made them, you know. Actually, there's a lot of those were put out on an 8-track. Not too many musicians around here say that some of their albums were on an 8-track.
That takes us back a ways.
Yeah, that's back a pretty good spell. I did that one, and then I did another one recorded with another one of my favorite guitar players, a guy named Robin Kessinger, who's done for the Flying Cloud record label in Reidsville, North Carolina. And did that one I didn't make another recording for 10 years or so after that one, but that one was in the 80s sometime. And then I did another one for the Flying Fish Company, which is a little bigger company. It's in Chicago, and it's called Rugby Guitar. And, you know, named after the community here. And that can always confuse people because they think it's got something to do with the game, you know, the rugby game. And anyway, that's another recording. Then I did another one called with Hay Holler, the fellow you entered Curry. And I've done 2 with him. I did that W.C. Henderson and Company, which is sort of my favorite, you know, CD that I've ever done. It had a lot of my friends on it. My piano player friend that I play with a lot, and Doc Watson did a few tunes on there, and Butch Robbins and David Holt. I had the opportunity to get up some of my favorite musicians to play on there. And then I did another CD with Steve Kaufman, who's another one of my favorite guitar players. He's a pretty well-known player. He plays all over the world all the time. And he puts out tons of video teaching, you know, videos, and he's real big into that kind of stuff, and he's real widely known and widely promoted guitar player.
Now you've got a couple of, you got one new project going on now, don't you?
I've got one going on right now. I've only recorded about 3 tunes for it, but at least, let's see, October I'm supposed to be working on it some more. It's just so hard to get time to, that's one of the hardest things that I ever try to do is record, because it takes time to do it good, and I don't like to do it, for one thing. You know, it's just no fun to me. Sit there and try to play in front of one microphone and not make a mistake is real hard, and I don't mind playing in front of a bunch of people, a big bunch, you know. And somehow or another, it's just hard to talk myself into going in a studio and recording. But you have to, so often, so you'll have something new, you know.
Who's going to be on this one with you?
Well, I haven't totally decided all the tunes. I've got some. With all the ones we're already recorded, I got the piano player friend while I could get him handy, you know, to play on a couple of tunes, 3 tunes, and I got some other friends of mine from up around Blacksburg play on the tunes that I've got recorded so far, and I've, you know, got in mind people I want to get to play certain tunes on there, and you know, you never know for sure, you know, how all that'll work out, but. Anyway, that's a project to work on there.
We'll look forward to that being released. We'll stay in touch with Kerry and be sure to get some when they first come out. Now, I know you've traveled extensively. You were just sharing with me a little while ago the award you received at the White House a few years ago. Just give us a little bit of a idea of where you've been, who you've met, who you've played for.
Well, you know, it's hard to remember all that stuff, but some of the most outstanding stuff that I remember, of course, that was a real thrill and excitement to get to go into the White House and receive an award, and I also, you know, took my guitar and picked a little bit while I was in there, and did that, and that was just a few years ago. But I've done several tours for like a section of the State Department, the USIS thing, you know, which they used to do quite a few. They would send out tours that would go overseas, and usually to third world countries, you know, where they've never heard our kind of music and that kind of thing. I've done right much of that stuff. I played in, I know one trip we went to Taiwan and Thailand and Hong Kong and the Philippines and Korea. I think we're in Singapore and Japan. And
you're doing better than some guys in the Navy.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've been, you know, like we played in some of those countries. We just traveled through, you know, but we did concerts in the most of them.
How is our American acoustic music received over there?
Usually real well. I know in one of the shows that I distinctly remember, that was in the early '80s when I did that trip. We played in Thailand, which was one of my favorite countries. The people there are beautiful, and I really enjoyed being there. And gorgeous country, and our concert we did, the princess of the country came out to our show, and that was a pretty big thrill to me, because that was a pretty big deal for the country to, you know, do that, to send out their, you know, royalty or whatever it is, you know, to see us. And we were told to be on our best behavior, and for me not to, you know, say anything stupid, you know, and not be no Virginia hillbilly, you know.
They didn't say it that way.
Well, pretty much. And
they just don't know what good is.
Yeah. And anyway,
I guarantee you, folks, this man is no hillbilly. I guarantee you.
And anyway, that was a pretty big thrill. And
now, who told you that? Who was it?
Well, you know,
you're going to give his name?
The director of the National Council for Traditional Arts, a real good friend of mine, and I've done lots of these gigs for. and everything. He was probably the one that told me that. You know,
That's almost as bad as what my son said to me last night.
Yeah. This fellow's name is Joe Wilson. I don't mind giving his name because he's, you know, he is a real important character in our music business, and he's a hillbilly himself from Tennessee, and which is, you know, the community just over next door here, you know, a few counties over, and he's, I mean, you can't put this in your magazine, but he always told me that I was just had never been nothing but a wart on the ass of progress, so he got along, you know. And
so he sounded like a good friend, and it was meant, I'm sure, in the spirit of camaraderie that day.
Absolutely. We've been through an awful lot of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. That's a funny story.
And we did, you know, I've done lots of things for the Smithsonian Institution. You know, I used to more than now. That was one of the first trips I ever got to do off. And the Smithsonian one day, how I got sort of into that, our local craft co-op, it's called the Rooftop of Virginia, centered in Galax down there, used to have me go demonstrate my craft. You know, take a guitar neck and whittle on it and go to either Richmond or sometimes Washington, D.C. And one time the Smithsonian was putting on some kind of a show like that, and I got to go demonstrate my craft. And from that, that's about 1971, they asked me to go to Montreal, Canada, to do the thing, and I got to meet lots of good musicians. I was there for 2 weeks, and I got to meet John Hartford and Vassar Clements and Norman Blake and some of my heroes that I've known for years and listened to their music. And that was a sort of one of the first things I got to do. And then, you know, later on got to do the tour I was telling you about. Then several other things, you know, for the Smithsonian, and got to go to Washington, play on the Mall, their 4th of July thing, and sort of, you know, got known a little bit by that crowd, and got to do some real neat gigs and travel a lot. And then that same, just not too many years back, the piano player, Jeff Little, that I play with, I got to go with him back to, on another one of the same sort of tours to Africa. I went to Africa and Pakistan and the Middle East, went to Bahrain and Oman and Sri Lanka. That's a long ways from here.
That's pretty good stuff for a guitar player from Rugby, Virginia, I'll tell you. That's amazing. And anything coming up?
And well, I've done a lot of stuff this last summer. We've done, they've been out, and I do quite a bit of teaching, my playing and my craft sometimes. And I did, like this last summer, 3 different workshops of that, one in Mars Hill, North Carolina, and one in the Puget Sound Guitar Workshop out close to Seattle, Washington, and the Augusta Heritage Workshops up in Elkins, West Virginia. And I've done that for probably the last 20 years, you know, go up there about every summer and teach either building guitars or my style of play. And do that, and I don't know, you know, the summer travel and stuff is pretty much over with now, and I never know, you know, what's coming next summer, you know.
Yeah.
Wintertime, we don't do too much. We play local gigs around here.
Settle in, build guitars, and play local.
And I know I do all kinds of, I play lots of little local gigs. Our little rescue squad right down here is having a festival tomorrow. It's the Rugby Rescue Squad, and they have a, you know, pretty good sized festival, and then they also play for suppers down in our little squad building. Sometimes we do benefits for somebody that's sick or take care of our community people. And the time I got to go to New York City, I got to play in Carnegie Hall. They had a Folk Masters radio program that they recorded, and Nick Spitzer was doing that, and that was a real neat series of public radio shows that they did, and that series I'm right there, they recorded in Carnegie Hall. And so I got to go be their Appalachian style guitar player. They had a blues guy, John Jackson. They had that night they had Raymond Connie, who's a pretty famous slack key Hawaiian style guitar player. He's an older gentleman, but he's the main one that most those guys learned from. and Jerry Douglas was there that night, a wonderful dobro player from Nashville, and so we got to play. But what was sort of funny, they sent they gave me a plane ticket, and they sent a limousine to pick me up. I'd never gotten to ride in one of those things. And I got up in front with the guys driving. I said, I don't want to ride in the back of this thing. And reminds you of being in a police car. If you have to get in the back.
We won't get into that.
And anyway, the guy, the driver, I got talking to him, found out he was a musician too, and played some. He even gave me a tape that he had made. And but anyway, I told him where I was going or what I was going to be doing while I was up there, and he was all excited about being able to play at Carnegie Hall. And he said, "Now here you're playing at Carnegie Hall. What possibly else could you do after this?" And I said, "Well, next Saturday night I'll be playing at the Rugby Rescue Squad."
Which, while it ain't as big, is just as important.
Just as important, yeah.
Yeah, that's a wonderful point of view.
Yeah.
I hope that young man learned something from that discussion.
Yeah. Well, I guess he's probably still wondering where rugby's at.
You're sitting here holding this beautiful instrument, and I know it's one you made about a year ago?
Yeah, about a little less than a year ago.
And what size is it? What's the?
Well, this would be called like a triple aught 45, and I call it triple aught because one of the most famous and oldest guitar makers in the country is C.F. Martin and Company, and back in they've been making guitars as a factory since 1833, and they've sort of designed a lot of styles and bracing patterns, and something that I've always considered to be the best, and so that's when I make a body shape like this, I sort of copy from one of their patterns, and I change a few things like my bridge and headstock, and so it looked like one of my instruments instead of one of theirs. But they came up with designs 100 years ago that I consider to be the way a guitar should be made, so that when you say triple aught, that's what they came up with, all these numbers, and things.
Now it's not as deep as what they call a dreadnought or a jumbo.
And it's not as deep this way, and it's cut deeper here, and in this case, this is like copied from the older style of instruments when the necks were all joined at the 12th fret like a classical guitar, and the bridges set a little feather back when you do that, and the body has to be a little longer. It's a little bit different shape. More modern guitars today are shaped a little different from this. They have more square shoulders and a longer neck.
Okay.
And makes a little more access to playing them down high strings.
Well, when you pulled this out of the case last night to show to the Luthiers Guild, my reaction, and I'm a banjo player, what do I know from guitars, was, oh my God, look at that instrument. It's just, and then when you played it, I'm going to do that in just a minute for us, it seemed to have really nice balance in the guitar, treble and bass.
Yeah.
It didn't seem to be fighting each other, and it just came in as clear and as nice as you could please.
Well, I think that's a characteristic of this size instruments. They are usually balanced and have a clear ring and that kind of stuff. And this certain one is made from Brazilian rosewood on the back and sides, and the necks of most all instruments that I make anyway are made of Honduras mahogany, and the tops, Appalachian spruce, comes from West Virginia. They call it red spruce sometimes, Adirondack spruce sometimes. It's all the same strain of wood that grows in the Appalachian region in the eastern U.S.
Now the Brazilian rosewood, you were telling us earlier that that's hard to get now?
Yeah, it was. I think even from the beginning of time, it's always been fairly scarce, and the old growth, the old trees that were, I think, either all been cut out with the destruction of the rainforests, or either just for some reason I don't think grows very much anymore. And the Brazilian rosewood that grows now is a little bit different kind of wood, a little bit different. It's the same wood, but it's just different from the old growth stuff. And it's always been fairly scarce, inexpensive, and it got used a lot back in the early part of the century, to make furniture and veneer, especially veneer, to cut up, and it's always been reasonably scarce wood, to make instruments or anything else, and like furniture industries used up a lot of it, and it doesn't take very much wood to make a guitar, as opposed to a bedroom seat or something like that, and I think that wood, it's always been desirable. It has a certain ring and tone wood to it. I think it's probably the king of tone woods, as far as you just hold a piece of it up and tap on it, and almost nothing rings like that, and it's just always been desirable wood to make instruments from.
How about letting us hear how this instrument sounds for a tune for us?
Well, let's see. What would be
one of your favorites? Whatever makes you feel good.
Okay, let's see. I have a little bit of an unusual style of playing. I'll play a tune here that is sort of more of a single note thing, which you would normally do with a flat pick. But when I grew up playing, I didn't have a flat pick or didn't know how to use one, and the only player that ever heard, was Mr. Ball, who lived around, and Maybelle Carter and Chet Atkins was the only guitar players I'd ever heard tell of. At that time, when I first started playing, and they all used thumb picks and stuff, so I thought that's the way you had to do it. But when I started trying to play fiddle tunes like my dad was playing, I found out they got to be single noted out. And so I just come up with a way of doing it with just down strokes of my thumb and up with my front finger here. It's curled up under where you can't see it too good, but all the upstrokes are done with the fingers down with the thumb. Thank you, appreciate that.
So that's the way you develop that?
Yeah, sort of normally when you would play a tune like that, it'd be done where you hold a single pick.
Okay.
Sort of like that, and I think it's hard to do with a thumb pick, but that's the way that most people do that. And I just got started playing, usually when I'd play something, it'd be more of a finger style. I'll demonstrate you a little bit of a tune.
beautiful playing.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Could you do me a favor?
Okay.
Look right at the young people who are going to be viewing this. And if you had a bunch of them here with you, you've had a long career and a long way to go. You've built hundreds of beautiful instruments, performed all over the world. Say something to young people who may be just starting on a guitar or a mandolin or a fiddle. What's it take?
Well, that's a little bit of a hard question. I think the main thing you've got to have is the desire to really want to do that. You know, you've got to have. I know in my case, I wanted to be a guitar player so bad that I couldn't stand it, and at the time it's really hard and frustrating sometimes to try to pick out a tune that you don't know or get a lick that you don't know. And you have to, nowadays it's a little easier because there's lots of really good videos out there to teach you how to do things, and there's books, and there's what they call a tablature that goes by a little number system that shows you exactly where every note is. And not always, like in my case, I was exposed to great musicians who live in my community. You could go see and you could learn from, and do that any chance you get, it's helpful to have other people that you play with. And I know in my case I had cousins and people that I would almost felt like friendly competition with. You know, like if you've got your neighbor there who can do a lick, you know, you've got to be able to learn that lick yourself to keep up with it. And I think that's a good learning process to do that, and you've got to have patience to be able to practice, and hopefully if you get a little bit better, it makes it easier, you know, and that's where it helps to have somebody to help you a little bit. If you know anybody and you can learn something from anybody, almost anybody that knows any lick that you don't know, you can learn from them, and just you know, be persistent, and don't give up. And when you start learning to play the guitar, when you get an F chord and it hurts your finger, keep trying, because you keep working at it while that finger will get tough, and that F chord won't hurt too bad. And it just takes persistence like that. It's not, if it was real easy to do, everybody would be a great guitar player. And it's something that does take a lot of work, and some people more than others. And so that's be the advice I'd say. You know, seek out other people that play and watch them. And most musicians that I know are plenty nice, and they're glad to show you things and talk to you about playing music, and just be persistent and work hard, and you gotta really want to do that, you know. And I think that's the main thing.
Thank you, Wayne. Now I know you're busy here. We're not going to take too much more of your time, but you were saying earlier you got about a 2-year backlog.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Probably take a couple of years of. I'm a poor business person, you know. I'd rather play and work at my pleasure, you know, and that's not good for business, because I work on what I feel like working on sometimes. But if I did in a straight line as orders came in or something, it would probably take at least 2 years to get an instrument.
And you're also a full-time mail carrier.
Yeah, I do that. I've been a mail carrier for 31 years now, and I still do that every day, and I still keep my shop running, you know, and play music what I can too. And I stay real busy. There's never any idle time that I've ever remembered ever having.
Well, it's a great work ethic. You take advantage of every minute and make the most of it, and that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
Of course, we'll put your address so people can reach you if they want more information about your fine instruments or upcoming projects or things like that. If you don't mind, we'll put it up.
Okay, that'd be fine.
And we've found a very open and friendly person here. Wayne is really what music is all about, and it's been our pleasure and our honor to talk to you.
Well, appreciate you guys.
Very much.
Appreciate y'all venturing this far back out in the sticks in Rugby, Virginia, to hopefully you find your way back home.
Well, I'm going home. I'm a little better.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say with you sitting here now, what happened? We were visiting a friend yesterday, and I tripped and fell and tore myself up pretty good. And Patrick and I went last night to the Luthiers Guild convention, and Wayne was there talking to us all and showing us a few things. And I was on crutches, of course, and obviously in quite a bit of pain. And my son, being a eternal smart aleck, looked at these gentlemen and said, "What's the big deal? He ain't the first Yankee to limp home from Virginia."
Yes.
And him and I are going to have a long, long talk on the way home about how to treat your dear old dad on the road.
Yeah.
And Wayne has a beautiful 57 T-Bird out there. We got old Bessie, our 68 Cornet. I don't think we're going to talk him into a race or anything like that, but maybe we'll take that fancy camera out there and get a shot of Wayne's T-Bird and put it up, let people see what he's tooling around the local countryside here.
One thing, you guys know how to travel in style. Now, there's no doubt about that.
Now, she's a little rough right now. It's all new inside. We'll get some body work and a paint job and a new interior this
Well,
winter.
mine needs the same thing.
Yeah.
I just got it, and it's waiting on a paint job now.
That's a lot more fun than a minivan or something.
Oh,
like
yeah,
that.
for sure.
You meet people, you talk to them, and they want to know what's in it, what you got, and it just opens up doors.
Absolutely.
It's a way to make things a little more interesting.
Yeah.
And I guess that's what music is all about, too, meeting interesting people, interacting with them, doing things. It's a great thing. And this shop here is a wonderful place. A lot going on, repairs, instruments being built, and business and fellowship of musicians and builders. It's a great thing.
There's a lot of that fellowship goes on around here.
Yes, I've experienced some of it both here and over in what was that town we were in?
In Hillsville.
Hillsville. My short-term memory is going away. I don't remember. I leave and I forget where I was, you know.
Yeah.
But a great bunch of guys over there last night.
Yeah.
This has been great. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming, and wish you success with your magazine.
Thank you. God willing, we'll run into you again one of these.
Hope so.
So long, folks.